Hi there, it's Nicole for Lawn Fawn, and today I am sharing a card featuring two of the newest products just being released from Lawn Fawn on February, I believe, 22nd. I am using the Rub-A-Dub Dub Stamps and Coordinating Dies and also the amazing Quilted backdrop, which I cannot say enough great things about. It is phenomenal. I am combining these for my card today. I already pre-die cut my background here, which is A2 sized using the quilted backdrop. I die cut it from smooth white cardstock. I use the Spellbinders tool-in-one die to pop out all those little pieces, because if you pop those out, you could leave them in if you wanted to, but a lot of them might just kind of pop out on their own. I like to use a piercing tool to get rid of any of those extras. But if you pop them out, you can put a contrasting color back behind, which is what I'm going to do today. And you're going to see a little pop of color through all of those, which is amazing. On the scrap or rest of that piece of cardstock, which was a half sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, I am going to stamp the images I'm using for my card. I am using all of the little ducks, the little rubber ducky for the bathtub, the bath bubbles, a bath bubble image, and I'm even going to use some little water splatters, which are more of a solid image that I'll use in a little bit stamped with Mermaid ink, and I'll show you that once I kind of get the rest of these done. So I am stamping these with Jet Black Lawn Fawn ink. This is a fantastic ink for Copic coloring. I have not colored with my Copics in a while. I've really been trying to concentrate on other coloring mediums, which I know a lot of you really have been asking for, but I like to kind of show a variety of different coloring mediums. And so today I grabbed my Copic markers and I'm doing really simple coloring here, keeping it simple with 3 colors of yellow for all of my ducks, including the rubber ducky, 2 colors of orange or orange reds for the bill of the duck and the feet. Very traditional, doing all yellows and oranges there. Then we're going to use some really, really light blues for the bubbles and some warm grays in light warm grays and then a darker warm gray for the bathtub. I wanted it to really kind of still be white, but still have that hint of color to it, shading, depth, and dimension. You could, like I mentioned, you can use whatever color medium you are comfortable with here. I love that there are so many amazing options. Now, I oversaturated my paper a little bit with my yellow, and that is, it bled outside the lines a little bit. I tried to push it back in with my colorless blender, and I really just didn't have great luck with that. It didn't bother me, so I did not recolor my largest duck. However, I was much more careful with the smaller little ducklings and let the colors kind of dry in between adding more color, more blending, things like that. I find that sometimes if I take a break from my Copics and come back, that does happen. I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but it's just one of those things I really need to kind of keep in my mind as something to watch out for. So I'm adding some little dot detail to my little ducklings, and my large duck really adds a lot of depth and dimension. It's one of my favorite things to do, especially with markers, Copic markers. So I've got my bubbles. They've got a little hint of blue to them. I also will go over them with the Wink of Stella colorless or clear marker, which has some nice sparkle in it. I like the sparkles for bubbles. And once my card is all together, I'm going to take glossy accents and add that to my bubbles, to the bills of my duck, their ducks, their feet. It just adds a great finishing touch. Now here is how I'm coloring in my bathtub. I'm kind of using that flicking or feathering technique with Copic markers and just pulling in that dark color, because you would think when you see that dark color that, wow, it's really dark. I believe that's Warm Gray 3. And then I'm blending out with Warm Gray 00 and Warm Gray 1, which gives a lot more amazing results. Blends out those marks really, really well. Then I die cut all of the coordinating, or die cut all of the images with the coordinating dies, and now I am stamping with Mermaid ink those little water puddles, and I'll die cut these as well. So here are all of my little pieces. I've got my background. I trimmed down some Mermaid cardstock to go back behind my quilted backdrop, so you'll see those little hints of blue, which match the water puddles beautifully. Not to mention, we're going to stamp a greeting on a fancy folded banner and tuck that underneath, which just is going to tie everything together beautifully. Here's that Wink of Stella clear glitter brush pen, adding the sparkly glitter to my bubbles. I think it's really kind of hard to see in video and maybe even in the photos. In real life, they've got a nice little sparkly sheen to them, especially underneath the glossy accents. Then I did go ahead and adhere the bathtub and the bubbles directly to my background. Next, I am going to attach my ducks with foam adhesive. I decided I needed a little dimension. This is a pretty simple design. I'm letting the background really kind of be very simple, but it's definitely decorative since it's this beautiful quilted backdrop, and it works for so many different things, you guys. I'm so excited about this background. You're going to see this from me a lot because I just absolutely love it. You can use these little ducklings. You could make it much more fancy with something else. I'd love to see it with the Lawn Fawn sewing, kind of the cute as a button stamp set. I think that would be amazing, especially if you have any sewers or quilters that you know. Lots and lots of ways to use this. And you can cut it out of all kinds of different colors. I'm using the Scrapbook Adhesives foam adhesive squares in both large and small, depending on the image. I love these. If you haven't used them before, one of my favorite things about these is that they're very thin in profile, meaning even though they're foam adhesive and they're going to help raise up whatever element you're adhering to your card, it's not going to be so much that it's so super high like some foam adhesives might be. Just the really thin profile still keeps your card fairly nice and flat, which I think that's a struggle for all of us in some aspect or another. The more layers you add, the more elements, the more things you add to your card, the thicker your card gets and the harder it is to mail. There are always those times where I create a card that has so many layers. In fact, I just created a card here a week or so ago that has a pop-up greeting inside and lots of dies on the front. And of course, all those pop-up things on the inside, a couple layers, because when you're doing a pop-up, you have to have a layer inside the card as well. So it's not just a card base. It's kind of like two card bases in one. And it's thick. That's going to be kind of a mess to mail. You're definitely going to have to use extra postage. You're going to probably want to use a padded envelope, things like that. This card, even though it's got some foam adhesive, it's going to still be very easy to mail. It is really, really flat, even though it's got a little bit of dimension. Now, once I have my adorable little images all in place, including some adorable little water splashes, so they've been making a mess in the bathtub, I'm going to take a black pen and go over the eyes on all of the ducks. This is something I always do. If you have watched my videos before, you know that I always do this no matter what I'm coloring with, because I really feel it makes their eyes pop. I also noticed that my duck was not laying flat, meaning that anywhere my duck is overlapping the big one, I don't want foam adhesive. I needed to, trim that up a little bit so that it laid a lot nicer and a lot flatter. Now I'm hiding some adhesive, and in fact, I decided to do this with some glue dots in between the little openings or any of the die cut areas on the quilted backdrop, just enough, all four corners, a couple places in the center of my quilted backdrop, and that's really going to be enough. There's lots of different adhesives you could use to do this. The little glue dots were just the right size. They were handy, and I thought they worked perfectly here. Now, I found it easier to flip my front panel over and take my background, which I trimmed slightly smaller than the quilted backdrop, to the back of this, and look at those little pops of aqua showing through. I absolutely love that the aqua ties in to the water puddles, and it's going to tie in to my fancy folded banner as well. It kind of brings the whole thing together. I love the aqua and yellow as I think they work together really nicely. This card, while I made it I'm a lucky duck to have a friend like you, or to have you as a friend, I guess is how it reads. There are so many different greetings. This could be rub-a-dub-dub, a new baby to love. It's your day, relax and enjoy. I'm a lucky duck to have you as my mom, to have you as my dad. I love that Lawn Fawn makes it so easy to customize your sentiments to the recipient. It's fantastic. It makes it so easy to use a single stamp set for multiple occasions. I die cut my banner from the Mermaid cardstock. This is a fancy folded banner. I love this banner. I stamped my sentiment, I'm a lucky duck, on this with Versamark ink. Heat embossed this with the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder, and then I'm adding some foam adhesive squares to the back. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I did my card, I took the photos, and I edited my photos, and I did the video, and my sentiment bothered me. So what I did to fix it was super easy. One layer of foam adhesive squares was not enough for the back of this. So many times it is, I ended up popping it up or taking it off, doubling up those little foam adhesive squares, so 2 all the way across, and it lays a lot nicer. So if in the finished here in the video or in the photos at the end you think it's not laying very nice, it looks a little concave in the middle, that's what happened. It bothered me. I sat here doing the video, doing my blog post and everything, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. So I popped that off, added more foam adhesive squares, and it looks great. Now, one last thing to finish up my card. I'm going to take the rest of my sentiments to have you as my friend, and I'm going to stamp this on the inside of my white top fold card base using Mermaid ink. I have not stamped this sentiment before. This is a brand new stamp set. I always like to stamp on a scrap piece of paper, especially if I'm using a block and not a stamp press or a MISTI or something like that. That worked great. Stamped it off one time, stamped it on the inside of my card, and we're going to add some water splashes from the Rub-a-Dub-Dub stamp set to the end and the beginning of that sentiment. I'm also kind of cleaning up here as I go. I like the Lawn Fawn stamp chamois. It is amazing. I use it to clean all of my stamps. Here are those little water droplets. I will go ahead and use a bone folder to crease my card, glue my quilted backdrop and Rub-a-Dub-Dub panel in place on the front. I always use a Teflon bone folder because that's going to get my crease really nice. I also almost always put adhesive on the card base and take my panel to the card base rather than putting it on the back of whatever I'm attaching to the card. So you can see this is an A2 size quilted backdrop. So pretty. Here is what the card looks like. When the recipient opens it up, there is the glossy accents on all of the bubbles, and you open it up and there is a sentiment inside. Thanks for joining me today for this card featuring the new Rub-a-Dub-Dub stamps and coordinating dies, as well as the quilted backdrop die. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Lawn Fawn that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.